Hi there, my name is Mr. Pete, and I am a fourth grade teacher, currently reading The City of Ember by Jean Duprow, about to start chapter 10, Blue Sky and Goodbye. Lena and Dune have finally sort of put their brains together, trying to solve the problems of Ember. Both have different ideas. Dune just wants to fix the problem. Lena wants to leave Ember. And you could see at the tail end of chapter 9 that they were sort of against each other with regards to what was behind that roped off door. We do have some mysterious figure kind of lurching around, going into the room. So we assume, or at least they assume, that something is about to happen that will save the city of Ember. Today's chapter 10, Blue Sky and Goodbye. We can assume the blue sky, making a prediction, is related to that city. Remember, she kept having dreams of a blue-skied city. And goodbye. Lena slept restlessly that night. She had frightening dreams in which something dangerous was lurking in the darkness. When the lights went on in the morning and she opened her eyes, her first thought was of the door in the pipeworks. And then right away she felt a thud of disappointment because the door was locked and someone else, not her, knew what was behind it. She went in to wake Granny. "Time to get up," she said, but Granny didn't answer. She was lying with her mouth half open and breathing in a strange, hoarse way. "Oh, don't feel too good," she finally said in a weak voice. Lena felt Granny's forehead. It was hot. Her hands were very cold. She ran for Mrs. Murdo, and after that to Clothing Square to tell Captain Fleary she would not be coming to work today. Then she ran to Oliver Street to the office of Dr. Tower, where she banged on the door until the doctor opened it. Dr. Tower was a thin woman with uncombed hair and shadows under her eyes. When she saw Lena, she seemed to grow even more tired. "Dr. Tower," Lena said, "my grandmother is sick. Will you come?" "I will," she said, "but I can't promise to help her. I'm low on medicine." "But come and look. Maybe she doesn't need medicine." Lena led the doctor the few blocks to her house. When she saw Granny, the doctor sighed. "How are you, Granny Mayfleet?" she asked. Granny looked at the doctor blearily. "I think ill," she said. Dr. Tower laid a hand across her forehead. She asked her to stick out her tongue, and she listened to her heart and her breathing. "She has a fever," the doctor told Lena. "You'll need to stay home with her today. Make her some soup. Give her water to drink. Put rags in cool water and lay them across her forehead." She picked up Granny's bony hand in her rough, reddish one. "What's best for you is to sleep today," she said. "Your good granddaughter will take care of you." And all day, that's what Lena did. She made a thin soup of spinach and onions and fed it to Granny, a spoonful at a time. She stroked Granny's forehead, held her hand, and talked to her about cheerful things. She kept Poppy as quiet as she could, but as she did all this, in the back of her mind was the memory of the days of her father's illness, when he seemed to grow dim like a lamp losing power. Simile. And the sound of his breathing was like water gurgling through a clogged pipe. Simile. Though she didn't want to, she also remembered the evening when her father let out one last short breath and didn't take another. In the morning a few months later, when Dr. Tower emerged from her mother's bedroom with a crying baby and a face that was heavy with bad news. In the late afternoon, Granny got restless. She lifted herself up on one elbow. Did we find it?" she asked Lena. Did we ever find it?" "Find what, Granny?" "The thing that was lost," Granny said. "The old thing that my grandfather lost." "Yes," said Lena. "Don't worry, Granny. We found it. It's safe now." "Oh, good." Granny sank back onto her pillows and smiled at the ceiling. What a relief, she said. She coughed a couple of times, closed her eyes, and fell asleep. Lena stayed home from work the next day as well. It was a long day. Granny dozed most of the time. Poppy, delighted to have Lena at home to play with, kept toddling over with things she found. Dust rags, kitchen spoons, stray shoes, and whacking them against Lena's knees, saying, "Play with this! Play with this!" Lena was glad to play with her, but after a while she'd had enough of spoon banging and rag tugging and shoe rolling. "Let's do something else," she said to Poppy. "Shall we draw?" Granny had drunk a full cup of soup for dinner and was falling asleep again, so Lena got out her colored pencils and 2 of the can labels she'd been saving. They were white on the back and made good enough drawing paper, if you flattened them out. With their sharpest kitchen knife, she whittled the pencils into points. She gave the green pencil and 1 can label to Poppy, and she herself took the blue pencil and smoothed out the other can label on the table. What would she draw? Taking hold of a pencil was like opening a tap inside her mind, through which her imagination flowed. Highlight that, a simile, comparing her brain opening up to tapping a tree for maple syrup. It was sort of pressure, like water in a pipe, simile. She always thought she would draw something wonderful, but what she actually drew never quite matched the feeling. It was like when she tried to tell a dream. The words never really captured how it felt. Poppy was grasping the pencil in her fist and making a wild scribble. "Look it!" she cried. "Lovely," said Lena. Then, without even a clear idea of what it was to be, she began her own picture. She started on the left side of the can label. First, she drew a tall, narrow box, a building. Then more boxes next to it, a cluster of buildings. Next, she drew a few tiny people walking on the street below the buildings. It was what she nearly always drew, the other city, and every time she drew it, she had the same frustrating feeling. There was more to be drawn. There were other things in this city. There were marvels there, but she couldn't imagine what they were. All she knew was that this city was bright in a different way from Ember. Where the brightness came from, she didn't know. She drew more buildings and filled in the windows and doors. She put in street lamps. She added a greenhouse. All the way across the paper, she drew buildings of different sizes. All the buildings were white because that was the color of the paper. She set her pencil down for a moment and studied what she'd done. It was time to fill in the sky. In the pictures she'd done with regular pencils, the sky was its true color, black. But this time she made it blue, since she was using her blue pencil. Methodically, as Poppy scratched and scribbled beside her, Lena colored in the space above the buildings, her pencil moving back and forth in short lines until the entire sky was blue. So she's drawing a blue sky, but in her world, her sky is its natural color, black. But we know our world is blue. So again, where is she compared to where we are? She sat back and looked at her picture. Wouldn't it be strange, she thought, to have a blue sky? But she liked the way it looked. It would be beautiful, a blue sky. Poppy had started using her pencil to poke holes in her paper. Lena folded up her own picture and took Poppy's away from her. "Time for dinner," she said. Sometime deep in the night, Lena woke suddenly, thinking she'd heard something. Had she been dreaming? She lay still, her eyes open in the darkness. The sound came again, a weak, trembling call. "Lena." She got up and started for Granny's room. Though she had lived in the same house all her life, she still had trouble finding her way at night. When the darkness was complete, it was as if walls had shifted slightly and furniture moved to new places. Lena stayed close to the walls, feeling her way along. Here was her bedroom door. Here was the kitchen and the table. She winced as she stubbed her toe on one of its legs. A little farther, and she'd come to the far wall and the door to Granny's room. Granny's voice was like a thin line in the dark air. Simile. "Lena, come and help. I'm coming, Granny," she called. She stumbled over something, a shoe maybe, and fell against the bed. "Here I am, Granny," she said. She felt for Granny's hand. It was very cold. I feel so strange," said Granny. Her voice was a whisper. I dreamed about my baby or someone's baby. Lena sat down on the bed. Carefully, she moved her hands over the narrow ridge of her grandmother's body until she came to her shoulders. There, her fingers tangled in the long wisps of Granny's hair. She pressed a finger against the side of Granny's throat to feel for her pulse, as the doctor had shown her. It was fluttery, like a moth that has hurt itself, and it's flapping in crooked circles. Simile. Can I get you some water, Granny? Lena asked. She couldn't think what else to do. No water, Granny said. Just stay for a while. Lena tucked one foot underneath her and pulled part of the blanket over her lap. She took hold of Granny's hand again and stroked it gently with one finger. For a long time, neither of them said anything. Lena sat listening to her grandmother's breathing. She would take a deep, shuddering breath and let it out in a sigh. Then there would be a long silence before the next breath began. Lena closed her eyes. No use keeping them open. There was nothing to see but the dark. She was aware only of her grandmother's cold, thin hand and the sound of her breathing. Every now and then, Granny would mumble a few words Lena couldn't make out, and then Lena would stroke her forehead and say, Don't worry, it's all right. It's almost morning, though she didn't know if it was or not. After a long time, Granny stirred slightly and seemed to come awake. You go to bed, dear, she said. I'm all right now. Her voice was clear but very faint. You go back to sleep. Lena bent forward until her hand rested against Granny's shoulder. Granny's soft hair tickled her face. All right then, she whispered. Good night, Granny. She squeezed her grandmother's shoulders gently, and as she stood up, a wave of terrible loneliness swept over her. She wanted to see Granny's face, but the darkness hid everything. It might still be a long time until morning. She didn't know. She groped her way back to her own bed and fell into a deep sleep. And when, hours later, the clock tower struck 6 and the lights came on, Lena went fearfully into her grandmother's room. She found her very pale and very still. All the life gone out of her. Granny has died. And this is a very interesting chapter because we were obviously heading towards finding out what Ember was all about. And we are interrupted with real life. Lena and Poppy are drawing pictures. Lena of this new city. And then Granny, who's very sick, passes away. And I think we'll just stop there. Really great description from Miss Duprow in this chapter, where she uses lots of really good imagery. Very sad. How is this going to impact Lena without parents now, or anyone in her family who is old and can take care of them? So will they go live with Mrs. Murdo? Will Mrs. Murdo come and live with them? That is a great question. All right, thank you so much for reading. Do all of those things that help that algorithm out. Click the like button, subscribe to the channel, and please add comments. I love having wonderful conversations with all of you about these great books, and so do my students. Any teachers that want to have conversations about how to build up your library or how to incorporate these read-alouds into your classroom, don't be afraid to send me a message. All right, let's find out what happens next. Are we going to find out more about what's going on with Lena and her family, or are we going to find more out about Ember, or both? Chapter 11, Lizzie's Groceries. Lizzie's Groceries. That's a weird chapter, especially after someone major passes away. All right, until then, I will see you on the next page. Yeah, peace.